Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Campea, and this special video is based on a user-submitted question. Now, a lot of people support the channel by sending in questions, but when they send in a question with like a $50 tip or more, I like to answer those questions in their own standalone videos. So that's what we're doing here right now. And this video comes to us from an anonymous viewer who writes in, "Hi John, new fan here. With the release of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, it got me thinking of why the prequels became, well, so divisive. Seems obvious to me. No matter what the directors or studios did, they had no choice but to end the trilogy story right up to the place where A New Hope starts. What are your thoughts?" All right, thanks for sending in that question, man. And you know, it's true. The Star Wars prequels, which is, of course, where The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, were, to say the least, divisive. I mean, it kind of heralded in an era where a lot of people fell out of love with Star Wars. But then again, today, there are many new fans today who said that those prequels were the start of their Star Wars fandom. So you got to take that into consideration, too. But I mean, you got to understand, there were complete documentaries made about how people felt let down by the prequels and what have you. So the question is, were those prequels doomed to fail, regardless of whatever they did with the prequels, because there was already a foregone conclusion of where that story needed to go? It needed to end in such a way that it led up with and was consistent with the events of the very first Star Wars movie, Star Wars: A New Hope. Now, what I'm going to say might surprise you a little bit, because I actually am somebody, I don't like, in principle, the idea of prequels. You know, when you're doing a movie to another movie, but that happens before the events of the first movie, because you already know where everything's going. I'm the type of guy that I like my stories moving forward. Now, that's not to say that you can't do them and do them well. Of course you can. And I don't mind the idea of a prequel that's set like hundreds or thousands of years before the events of the original movie, because then there's really no strings attaching them. You're kind of free to tell whatever story you want. So generally speaking, I don't like the idea of prequels, in principle, with some exceptions. That said, no, I don't think the fact that the prequels were in fact prequels, the fact that they did have to lead up and end with the results, or at least line up in such a way that they could then lead into Star Wars: A New Hope, I don't think that doomed those movies at all. Listen, there are a lot of movies come out where we know what the ending of that movie ultimately is, right? Look at a movie like Titanic. It was the #1 box office film of the year for many, many, many years. Titanic won tons of Oscars, won Best Picture and a whole bunch of others, right? Well, everybody knew going into that movie that whatever this movie does, it needs to end with the Titanic sinking. That's where it's got to go. There's nowhere else for that movie to go if they want to even pretend it's anything historical. At some point, you got to get to a point in that movie, the Titanic hits an iceberg and it sinks and a lot of people go down with the ship. However, knowing that does not stop the filmmaker from being, in this case, James Cameron, from being able to tell a great, compelling story and tell it in such a way that it becomes engaging and entertaining to the audience, even though we knew where it was going. And I would argue with that, with the prequels, you still could have done them as prequels and yet made them in such a way that, you know, a much larger base of the audience would have been on board with it and liked it. I would suggest that the movies didn't work, and this is just my own subjective point of view, but they just didn't work because they didn't work. It's not that they didn't work because George Lucas just had a bad idea of doing them as prequels. He could have done them as prequels and done them in such a way that everybody loved them. Now, I realize I say that as if that's a real easy thing. Just make a movie so that everybody loves. It's a next to impossible thing. My whole point in here, though, is that I don't think the fact that these films had to lead up as a build-in to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, I don't think that had anything to do with why the films ended up being so divisive, as you put it. Question here is, guys, what do you think? Do you think that that might be the main key ingredient as to why the prequels were so divisive for so many people? Or do you think, like I do, that that probably had nothing to do with it? I want to know what you guys think. Jump down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys, that'll do it for me for this video. Thank you so much for being here. My name's John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.